All right. Will you call roll, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Connolly, I believe she's running late. Mr. Duncan is not here. Ms. Hardy is not here. Mr. Litkenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you.
Are any of the folks who are not here wanting to join us by phone? Okay. All right. Well, it doesn't look like we have any proclamations. Oh, let's move to a meeting agenda. Do we have a motion regarding, do
Mayor, move approval of the agenda.
we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it. Moving on to proclamations and special presentations. It looks like there are none this evening, is that right? Okay. Any oaths of office to administer?
2 people here to take their oath,
Great.
and I'm not sure if
All
there's
right.
anyone else. But
Congratulations. Thank you for your service.
Oh, so we have 3 people here. Are you Leanne? Okay, great. So I'm going to have everybody do it all at once. Will you raise your right hand and then just respond at the end? Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of your Board or Commission according to the best of your ability, so help you God? Yes. Great. We'll just have you sign this top.
Mayor, are you going to give our new board members a pin?
I will indeed. And their kids if they'd like. So, absolutely. And your, oh, there you go.
Keep smiling at me, please, so I can give this to communications. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you.
All right. Now we are going to move to written comment, or not written comment, but just general public comment. And Madam Clerk, do you have any written comments you'd like to read for us?
I do. Brian Williams submitted a signed petition in support of adding sidewalks on the north side of Park Avenue at the intersection of North Virginia Avenue. And the following wrote in support of the petition, in addition to those that signed: Edwin Lim, Bruce Gutenberg, Bob and Mary Beth Clark, Jenny and Mark Carroll, the Rambo family, Eric and Kate Nesson, William A. Schmidl, John and Lily Thomas, Ritu Kudika, Tina McCormack Beatty, Matthew Grund. And then, not in your packet, but included, was the ESC's recommendations for the city's state legislative agenda. And that's all of them.
All right, thank you very much. So we're now going to move to the receipt of public comment. And I would ask if you could just to state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to 3 minutes so that everyone gets a chance to speak. I noticed there are a fair amount of comments about the sidewalk on Park Avenue. And I wonder if the city manager could maybe just speak to that before our speakers get up here, and you're all welcome to speak, but I just thought we'd have an update since there seems to be a lot of interest in that. Mr. Shields, do you have anything you might be able to
Well,
speak
thank
to?
you, Mayor Tarter, and I'll just say at the beginning, it is really great to have so many letters of support for improving walkability in the city. It's a top priority of the city councils. We have been working for several months on a larger project that would be funded through a Smart Scale grant application as part of the Park Avenue Great Streets project. Due to the nature of that state funding, those funds aren't going to be available to us for several years. We had set aside some funds, however, as a local match for that eventual grant. In hearing these comments and also sort of working through our internal prioritization of projects, we would like to recommend to the council that we use a portion of that local match that was designated for the greater Park Avenue Great Streets program in order to fill this gap, to close this gap of sidewalk availability on Park Avenue. So we'll have more discussion about the details of that from a funding perspective, but we're doing the preliminary engineering right now as a joint effort between our planning staff and our Department of Public Works. And so I think we fairly quickly will try to turn around a good concept for that. It needs to tie in nicely into the park. It needs to tie in ultimately nicely to what we're building on the opposite side of the street with the library. And so there is some engineering we want to do just to make sure that that all works well. But with the council's approval of that reallocation of funds, then we would be able to move forward with that project. So that's some initial thinking on that, and I'm sure we'll get more comment on that tonight.
All right, thank you for the update. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and move on to public comment. Our first speaker is Robert Fletcher. Welcome. Followed by David Wicks.
Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Robert Fletcher. My address is 6960 Birch Street in Falls Church. And I am the chair of the board of the Friends of Falls Church Homeless Shelter. And I wanted to address the council briefly tonight just to express our thanks to the city and the council for your continued support of the shelter. As you know, we operate the city's winter shelter on Gordon Road. We're opening for the season this Thursday, day after tomorrow, November 15th, and we're open every night from November 15th through March 31st. With the cold weather we're just having come in, it's a good time to be opening, so we're looking forward to that. Again, we have 12 beds in the shelter, 10 for men and 2 for women in a separate room. We serve a hot dinner and a breakfast, and we provide bag lunches. And with the city's financial support, as well as our other donors, we were open for 137 operating nights last winter. We expect to do the same this winter. We served over 3,200 hot meals to our homeless guests. We provided over 1,600 bed nights, and that's the number of beds filled per night the shelter is open. And with the kind of generous financial support we had, we were also open all day on Thanksgiving Day and on Christmas Day, and we hope to be able to do that again this year, in support of our guests. We served 35 different individuals over the course of the season last year. And working with our shelter manager, which is New Hope Housing, we were able to place 4 of the homeless guests that we had in permanent housing by the end of the season last year. So I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but given the difficulties of affordable housing in the city and in the larger area, we feel that was a pretty good rate. We're also supported by more than 100 volunteers who work at the shelter each evening over the course of the season, and they come from the City of Falls Church, and they also come from the greater Falls Church area. And we're supported by, lots of other folks in the area, including a number of members of the faith community, many churches and synagogues in the area. So we really wanted to complement our good working relationship we have with the city, including the facility that we have there on Gordon Road. We've been working with Leslyn Barrow and the team from Housing and Human Services. And we've also been working with the facility maintenance group to maintain the shelter, and we think that's been going very well. So, as we all know, homelessness continues to be a serious problem and an ongoing problem here in the city and in the greater community. And so the city's support for the shelter is greatly appreciated, and it's so important to us to be able to continue to provide this very important service. So again, I just wanted to really express our thanks on behalf of the shelter and behalf of the greater community in your help in combating this serious problem. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Phil.
Is there a fundraising opportunity for those who would like to contribute cash?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to our website, which is fcshelter.org. There's a location to donate right through the website. We also accept, checks and cash donations, and there's also an address on the website as to where you can send those donations. And those are all fully appreciated and very welcome. And we do get a fair number of individual donations, both cash and in-kind donations during the year, which again are very appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hardy?
Great, thank you for the update and for your service. One of the things I want to just call out for just the general public is actually the volunteer opportunities. So I know you're always looking for volunteers. Another great just hands-on activity that I do with my own kids is actually making lunches for the shelter.
Right.
It's just really nice, actionable thing to do, especially in the holiday season. So just want to make sure people know about that opportunity. I've personally noticed that I believe our homeless population in the city seems to have increased in the past year. Do you all expect that you're going to have to turn away more people than usual? What's your sense on that data point?
We haven't opened yet, so we don't really know exactly how it's going to proceed this year. Again, you're right, the homeless problem continues to be out there and continues to grow. We expect to be full. We were full almost every night last season. And of course, there are overflow shelters that folks that try to come to us can go to, like Bailey's and some other places. So we're doing the best we can to accommodate everyone's needs. As to whether we'll be able to cover everybody that needs to be covered, probably not. I mean, there's definitely more demand than we have beds for.
To get a sense of that demand, do you all track how many people you have to turn away?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I'd love
Yeah.
to know kind of how that looks this year. If that's
Yeah,
okay.
again, we can report on that later in the season. I know last season we kept records, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was dozens over the course of the season that we had to turn away because we were full.
Thank you again for all you do.
All right, Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yeah, thanks. Bob, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys for volunteer opportunities?
You can, again, through our website, there's an email connection I think it's just fcshelter.org or at fcshelter.org, and you can contact us through that. Again, there's a phone number there.
Okay.
You can contact me directly. My email address at the shelter is rfletcher@fcshelter.org.
Okay.
So try
Great.
that, and we can get in touch with you. And we always need additional volunteers. Again, we have to have a volunteer there every night to work with the paid staff from 6 p.m. to midnight.
Okay.
And so that's a lot of people we have to fill.
And what's the season for you guys?
November 15th to March 31st.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, any other questions? If not, thank you so much for your service to our community and meeting this critical need. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you all.
All right. Our next speaker is David Wicks, followed by Bill Andrews. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, I'm David Wicks, and I live at 412 Park Avenue. I'm here to express my support for the proposal to extend the sidewalk along the north side of Park Avenue. As it currently stands, I believe it would be consistent with the greater design and plans which have been described for Park Avenue, as well as there's a safety issue there. Currently, the sidewalk actually abruptly ends just past where our homes are, and people are forced to walk out into the oncoming traffic. And so I wanted to, again, express our desire and concern to continue that portion of the sidewalk so that we can hopefully eliminate any potential problems that may exist as a result of the current design.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Bill Andrews. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I'm Bill Andrews, and I live in the 400 block of Park Avenue at 410, which happens to be where the sidewalk on the north side of Park Avenue comes to an abrupt halt and actually curves in channeling pedestrians into the street. Pedestrians are either forced to cross Park Avenue mid-block, having to navigate traffic in both lanes, or walk on the street alongside parked cars. While this is an everyday occurrence, the scene on Saturdays and holidays is terrifying. As one watches scores of parents pushing strollers and holding kids' hands in the street heading to Cherry Hill Park amidst the farmers market traffic. I'm here tonight to urge you to complete a safe path to the park. Last July, the CACT delivered a memorandum to you concerning sidewalk connections generally and specifically suggesting steps to complete the sidewalks between the 400 block of Park Avenue and Cherry Hill. On November 5th, the council was provided with a document prepared by Brian Williams of Virginia Avenue that succinctly outlines the public safety issue, demonstrates why there is a window of opportunity at this time, and how after more than a decade, the neighbors need action now. We are a growing community. Park Avenue is ever increasingly used by pedestrians to access the park, City Hall, and the community center. It is time for the path to the park to become a safe path for our citizens, young and old. The project is to install sidewalks alongside the property lines on Park Avenue of 2 residences. That's it. Project is both small and discreet. We understand, and the city manager just indicated that there may be funds available for the project. The expenditure will substantially and demonstrably improve public safety. In the last 8 days, you've been provided, actually tonight I guess you will be provided the second one, 2 copies of Brian's document. The first one was signed by 52 neighbors, and the second by 43 more. Tonight you heard from other people who've written to the council in addition to those 95 neighbors. In other words, you have overwhelming neighborhood support. The time has come not only to acknowledge that this is a long overdue project and a worthy one, but it's time to make its completion a priority. Along with my neighbors who've signed on to Brian's submissions to you, written to you, or are here tonight, I urge you to complete a safe path to the park. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is J.R. Twitford. Welcome. Followed by Eva Williams and Bennett Williams.
Hi, J.R. Twyford at 414 Park Avenue. I first want to thank all of our elected officials and professional city staff for your service in these never-ending meetings and hearing all of our concerns and voices. I just want to very briefly echo Dave Wicks and Bill Andrews' comments and add my shared sentiment about the importance and urgency of the sidewalk initiative on Park Avenue. One thing I think is notable about the issue is the level of consensus and lack of any NIMBY movement or organized opposition. It seems pretty clearly good use of tax dollars and common sense. The safety of our children, walkability, and growth of commerce are all helped, I think, by this project. And one specific element I'd like to amplify is that the intersection of Park in Virginia is also on school days a bus stop, both directions. And so because there is no sidewalk on either that north side of Park or either side of Virginia, ultimately you've got well-behaved kids, but a couple dozen of them either in someone's yard or in the street, which I see every day. And one concern that I would share in closing is that while we do have potentially an actionable plan and broad consensus with the holiday schedule and poor winter weather on us, my concern is that we might lose some of the momentum on what feels like an imminent solution to a very limited problem, and would ask that that staff propose some kind of a milestone of schedule that the neighborhoods could follow, in order to keep this shared sense of urgency on the project. Thank you for the opportunity to give you my comments.
Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. Eva and Bennett Williams, come on down.
Hi, I'm Eva Williams. Hi, I'm Bennett Williams.
I'm 14 years old and a freshman at George Mason High School.
I'm 8 years old and I am in 2nd grade at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School.
And we live at 311 North Virginia Avenue off of one of the busiest streets in the city, Park Avenue. We cross Park Avenue at least 4 or 5 times a week on a weekly basis to return books to the library,
Play sports at Cherry Hill,
or get our flu shots at Northern Virginia Pediatrics. As daughters, sons, siblings, and most importantly, citizens of Falls Church City for almost a decade, the lack of safety precaution involving Park Avenue is an unacceptable problem that must be solved as a first priority.
We have 2 options
When crossing Park Avenue, to either cut through our neighbor's yard, which will most likely be busy with construction over the next several months due to a new house being built,
or
we may look from side to side to avoid oncoming traffic, say our prayers that we are not hit by a car, and run across at full speed. This is clearly not an easy way to cross the street, and we hope that you consider this as one of the top priorities of the city, as it affects us each and every day. So thank you for your consideration, and we hope that this is implemented soon.
All right, thank you. Great job. Both of you, would you all like some city pens?
Sure.
Okay. There you go. Nice job. All right, our next speaker is Mia and Noah Meyer.
I think I'm your next speaker listed, so we'll just combine our efforts.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Oh, yeah. I'm Patty C.O. Mayer.
Okay.
I live at 204 North Virginia Avenue.
I'm Mia Mayer. And I'm Noah Mayer.
And we are also here in support of the sidewalk and possibly a crosswalk at the junction of North Virginia and Park Avenue. So I appreciate the city manager's comments. We are very excited that there's a lot of community support. Our neighbors have been talking about this for years. And one of the other things I wanted to point out is the timing seems right, as there is new construction at the house on the corner at 322 Park Avenue. And it sounds like the builder is amenable to allowing a sidewalk to be built there too. I just want to echo what everyone else has already said, that there are kids standing at bus stops on that corner, that we cross the street multiple times a day. Where did we just go tonight?
We went to the hair cuttery.
And what did we do when we stood on the corner at hair cuttery?
We just waited.
For a long time. And I have to add that the other reason I'm here is I accompanied the children of Brian Williams to make sure they got safely here at night walking down North Virginia. So we purchased our house to live in the city because it's a walkable place. We love living here. We're in the Great Forest neighborhood. And we thank everybody's service and attention to a thing that matters to many citizens. Anything else you want to say? Thanks.
All right, thanks. You guys want some pins? All right, let's see. Right there, you want that one? All right, here's one for you. Nice work. You get the handshake and the pen. All right, our last speaker is Jeff Tarbert. Jeff, you here? Come on up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Jeff Tarbert, 426 Park Avenue. That may sound like a common address tonight. I just want to say how strongly I support the last 5 speakers, and that's a very hard act to follow. And my neighbors who've already spoken about that gap in the sidewalk on the north side of Park Avenue. On Sunday, the VIPAS had its annual meeting, and Councilmember Duncan was there. Councilmember Hardy gave a great report on the parking issues that she's dealing with. Planning Director Stoddard was there. They gave really good presentations, and it explained a lot about what's going on. So I think that's another part of why you're hearing what you're hearing tonight. And I very much appreciate Mr. Shields' comments at the front of the meeting, and hopefully this can be expedited as much as possible. Second role, I'm also city's representative to Nova Parks, Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority. Thursday, we're having a meeting, and we're voting on giving the chair authority to sign an MOU with the City of Falls Church concerning moving the money from Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, I believe that's right, Dave will correct me if I'm not, onto the city and then onto us, so we can start the dual trail program through on the WNOD from roughly where the bridge ends on Broad Street to where the new bridge will be coming over Lee Highway. And we've started doing some of the engineering work. I'm hoping there'll be, with our own money, Park Authority's money, much as the city's manager is suggesting you do with Park Avenue. But hopefully that can be something that'll be ready in about 1.5 years, if not sooner. It's all approved. They've already broken ground, obviously, on the bridge over Lee Highway. So that's coming. We're taking our action on Thursday. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your service to the community. Before we move on, I guess I might just ask my council members, I think I know the answer to this, but is there a consensus to direct the city manager to move forward on the sidewalk on Park Avenue?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'd certainly support that motion and make it.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Z.
Yes.
I do support this, and obviously it's been a project that some would say has been overdue. I have also taken my chances crossing that stretch at least several times a day, sometimes accompanied by my animals, sometimes not. I do want to be responsive to the comments here, and so I would ask the city manager to give us a general idea of when he thinks engineering would be performed and when this work might be implemented as well, and whether the oncoming winter season would interfere with that. And I'm mindful of the limited capacity that we have on city staff right now to do this, so I would ask him to address those concerns as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Z. First, I would just note that the preliminary engineering is being done right now. And with that, we can identify any issues or any things that might need to be factored into the final design for it. I don't have an actual date, but I think we'll have a date probably within a week in terms of what the schedule for this project would be. And so if you could bear with me on that, and we can get that out to the community in response to the emails that we've gotten, we can communicate back out what that schedule would be. Councilmember Z alluded to our staffing, our staff resources in Public Works, and as I think everybody is aware, this is a very kind of superheated employment market, and a lot of our very bright and capable engineers are being lured away from us, and there are 2 instances of that have just occurred in the last 2 weeks with the loss of Jason Widstrom, who will be joining Arlington County, and James Mack, who will be joining WMATA. These are 2 really important members of our DPW team who would typically lead in the design for a project such as this. Mike Whitfield is working very hard to get staff aligned and assigned with these losses, and will also be busily recruiting. And so I'll keep council informed in terms of our efforts in the recruitment front, and I anticipate we'll go through good advertisement, and we'll have some good hires that will come to us soon. But this is a loss, and with 2 very talented members of our staff.
Ms. Hardy.
I just want to say that I definitely support it, and I am sensitive to kind of our short staff in DPW. This seems like a relatively straightforward project, so I certainly would also be open to kind of a more creative resourcing model. So if this is something that we can outsource and say, hey, just build this length of sidewalk for us, this feels like a project that could fit that sort of different resource model than what we might traditionally do. Given that I think I learned on Sunday at the VPAS meeting that we've discussed Park Avenue since 2014, I would certainly love just to see some small improvements like this get done. So I certainly support moving ahead with this. Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yeah, thank you. Fully support this and understand the community's concerns, and love to make this a priority. I too have experienced the precarious crossing there as well. Just a quick question for clarification, maybe for the community's benefit. Are there anything that we need, the community needs to be made aware of in terms of time frame related to easement or eminent domain? Is that going to be an issue in terms of putting a sidewalk there, or is that already been handled?
No, not as currently conceived.
Great.
Now, as part of the preliminary engineering, we lay it all out, and there may need to be some compromises to the ultimate design from, how you might ideally want it situated. But the intent is to stay within the existing public right-of-way.
Great. Okay.
All right, anything else? I would just say walkability has been a priority of this council, I think probably more than it has been in any recent years that I can remember. Not just walkability, but traffic calming, pedestrian safety, bikeability, and I think we're really turning the corner as a city. I would ask for some patience at times because there are a lot of projects that need to be done, and it's going to take a while to get through all of them, particularly with some of the major projects we have on the plate. But we are working, I think, as a council, all in the same direction to get these kind of projects done as soon as possible. So we appreciate your patience with us. All right, is there any other public comment? If not, let's move on to council requests. Thank you all for coming out. You're welcome to stay, obviously, if you'd like. Are there any council requests at this point? Okay, let's move on to the report of the city manager. Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. There's three things I'd like to discuss during the manager's report. One is the financial report for the first quarter. We're also, Ms. Bobble will give that report. We're also joined by our library director, Jenny Carroll, and she will provide an update for the council and the community on the library project. Before I turn it over to Ms. Bobble just for the financial report, I did want to just acknowledge the Amazon announcement today. And there's been a lot said about it in the press. And just a few notes that I would add to that general discussion is that I do agree that it's a big day for the capital region and a big day for Northern Virginia. Obviously, there'll be two new headquarters for Amazon, one in New York and one in Arlington. I was able to join Jim Snyder, our Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, and our Mayor, Dave Tarter, to join the governor at this announcement. It was a pleasure particularly to see Jim Snyder, who knows everybody in the room there, and the mayor knows a good number of them as well. But the reason I mention that is that because we have been marketing the campus project for 5 years, we've been involved and we've built these relationships with a lot of the people who are in that room. And we are all regional partners. We're all trying to accomplish good and positive and progressive things for the region. And it was a very buoyant mood in that room. A couple things that I would note that haven't been talked about quite as widely is that part of this opportunity at Crystal City comes about from a great deal of loss that occurred with the base realignment work that was done about 8 to 10 years ago. That area lost about 20,000 jobs, if my memory serves, with jobs moving out and being moved around the country. And that really created the opportunity with all the vacancy and the office market that was in that space and all the infrastructures there to serve a really vibrant employment sector. So in many respects, this is filling a vacuum that was created due to some federal decisions made a while back. But make no mistake, there will be a lot of transformation, a lot of new construction, and a lot of really reimagining of what that whole corridor is going to look like. But we work so hard to try to recruit and bring office development to the city of Falls Church, and one of the great headwinds that we've faced is that vacuum that occurred 10 years ago with that round of BRAC, and then the recession. And creating those jobs will lift the overall office market, and I think that will help the city in accomplishing our strategic objectives as well. And then one other, big takeaway from today's announcement is the role that Virginia Tech is playing in building the talent and the workforce that the tech sector needs. Virginia Tech is obviously going to be a critical partner to them. And we obviously have been working very closely with Virginia Tech as we imagine our future on West Falls Church as well. And so it's good to see Virginia Tech be such an important partner in the Commonwealth's goals and in Northern Virginia's goals. So part of it, my purpose tonight is to say congratulations to the region, because it took a lot of good cooperative work to make something like this happen.
All right. Thank you for that update.
And so now I'll turn it over to Ms. Bawa for the first quarter financial report.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter and members of the council. We have for you the first quarter results, July 1st through September 30th of 2018. So overall, the first quarter revenues are slightly under budget by almost 0.5%, which is $47,000 for the first 3 months. Key revenue indicators are showing mixed results so far, and I want to mention up front that these are kind of inconclusive. We have, for the most categories, 3 months worth of data, and for some, we have 1 or 2 months of data. So it's not sufficient to formalize a trend for the whole fiscal year quite yet. But I do want to call out the personal property taxes for the first quarter are approximately 1.7% lower than the fiscal year 19 projection for the first 3 months. They're slightly lower, almost same as the first quarter as fiscal year 18. This category has been doing well for the past few years. We did budget fiscal year 19 at 5% over the last year's actual. We did see an increase of 1% in the vehicle count, in the assessed valuation, as well as the vehicle count. However, we saw a 1.8% decrease that offset this increase in the in the business property that's owned by businesses. And so depreciation has exceeded the new investments by businesses. So this is kind of, and also I want to say that this category does not include any indication of supplementals, which comes out usually towards the end of the year. So we know that it is performing at this rate, but it may be slightly adjusted by when we get those details. Meals tax and sales tax both have performed slightly above budget for the first quarter. Licenses and permits is below budget by roughly 18%. Also want to say that, you know, one project here or there can make significant number math skews here. So we do expect the permit fees from Founders Row to show up later on this fiscal year. And other taxes are 5% below budget. At this point, we are seeing a decrease in the communication taxes, the cigarette taxes, as well as the water and sewer tax, and also the decals is also behind by almost less than $10,000. So altogether, the revenues are at 0.5% less than budget projected at this time. Expenditures, on the other hand, show a slight underspending of budget, 0.4%. Again, we have a lot of contracts that are cyclical in nature. We may have some expenditures coming from the snowstorms, so it'll be more and more concrete when we get through the year. For the revenues, we will bring a first look at the next year's revenues to you in early December when we, in preparation for the next year's budget. However, I feel that the February projections that we bring you, the half-year projections, will be more concrete in preparation for the next year's budget when the city manager presents in March. That concludes my report, and open to questions that you may have.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Hardy.
Great, thank you, Ms. Bawa.
Sure.
One thing that you mentioned in your report led me to ask about kind of the business side of things. I think last time we talked about this, my concern was really on the business side. Generally, businesses tend to be more conservative ahead of a recession than, say, consumers are. And so when I looked at the personal property, and what you mentioned is that the number of new cars is actually still going up, but it was offset by the depreciation on the business side exceeding any new investments they made. And then I looked at B-Poll, and B-Poll looked like it was lower than projected as well. I know, again, everything's really not conclusive at this point, given only one quarter's worth, but I think we really should keep an eye on the business side of things in case people are being a little more conservative in anticipation of any changes in the macroeconomy before consumers, maybe.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. But I did see that meals tax and sales tax again on the consumer side look pretty strong, so maybe people are still feeling pretty good, but maybe not after this quarter's worth of stock market gains or losses.
All right, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. A couple of questions that have been raised. The meals tax, especially, numbers going up. Is there any way to measure whether that's mostly due to an increase of the number of restaurants, or is it going up because, you know, all restaurants, incumbent and new, are doing whatever they're doing, either better, the same, or worse? Do we track that? I mean, is that information that's available to us?
I'll have to consult with the revenue department, but we can look into that and see the number of restaurants at this time last year, or some sort of
Right.
a comparison.
Exactly,
Yeah, we
right,
can look
right.
into that.
That would be
When we
helpful,
do
I
our
think.
next year's projections, we'll look into that.
Right, as we put the budget together. And second, you mentioned winter weather. I gather that they're predicting, you know, more snow than usual this winter. Did we, when we project our removal and road treatment budget, do we just have a number that we use, or do we amp it up depending on what the Farmer's Almanac says?
There is a great deal of science that goes in, and it's wrong every year.
Okay, and we really don't know that until pretty late in, you know, March, because snows here come sometimes late in the season.
We do have a budget for it each year, and if we exceed that budget, then it comes out of essentially the paving area, where if we underspend on snow removal, then we can pave more. That's a little bit of the kind of the way, it's all a lot of the aid that we get from VDOT, and so it's going to be used on our roads one way or the other.
Okay. Given the interest in paving and marking, I guess I should hope for a light snow weather then. Because we would like to keep up the paving and marking, I think, regardless of how much snow we get. Okay, thanks.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. On the last page, and I do understand the first quarter is really too early to set a trend, but you do give us a comparison to the first quarter of FY 2018, where we were overspending, and we seem to be overspending a little bit more at this juncture, if I'm reading this correctly. What should I conclude from looking at these numbers, besides the fact that we appear to have a deficit at this current point in time?
A lot of the spending here is one-time in nature and is not going to be straight line. Like if I were to do a year-end projection, I would not just do a straight projection based on this first quarter expenditures. There are some expenditure savings a couple of the departments have done in anticipation of the City Hall project, like in Public Works and IT, the wiring and things like that. So this is purely one-time in nature kind of expenditures that are not going to be continuing in the second and the third quarter.
I do have two other questions.
Sure.
The second one is when we do recommission the renovated City Hall, there will be some costs associated with that as well. Will those show up next time as well as one-time costs? And if so, what's the magnitude, or will they not be on these books?
We're looking at department budgets for personnel as well as non-personnel, and then based on the spending is when we are trying to realize if any savings in their non-personnel to be used for any such one-time causes. I do not expect that these huge expenditures to carry on, like I said, in the second and the third quarters.
Well, I do have a pickup truck if you need to borrow that. I don't volunteer to drive it. Lastly, the fees from Founders Row, can you give us a magnitude of expectation, what we should expect in this fiscal year?
From what I have talked to Mr. Snyder, we're going to get it in phases, but it could be over $1 million. 1.1, 1.2 is what I've been told, but again, it all depends on how the plans work out. And
I like your rounding errors. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ellington House?
So this is from Ms. Bowen, Mr. Shields, and I think just for general public consumption. I obviously very excited, I think, as a lot of people are, about Amazon coming to the region. I've been bullish about them choosing Crystal City for quite some time. But I think what gets lost in a lot of this, and Wyatt did a great job of kind of summing up the impact of BRAC on Crystal City and what Amazon means for kind of reigniting that corridor. But I think what's maybe lost on some folks is the indirect benefit to surrounding communities, business communities related to an Amazon. And you look at the amount of revenue that's driven to the city from personal property and BPOL, and that's tied very much to the business community. And what's really exciting about Amazon is raising the bar in the DC area for technology and innovation. And I look at Falls Church and think about not only the unique business community here, but the focus on education, on inclusiveness, and am really excited about continuing to create an environment where you've got incubators and startups and companies that are looking to do business either directly with Amazon or looking to kind of follow the momentum of a company like that. And I look at what we're continuing to try to build here in Falls Church and the types of businesses that we can attract and what that means for the vibrancy of the community as well as direct revenue. And so, I would urge council and staff and the rest of the community to continue to support ways that we can create, an inclusive community, an inclusive business environment, and drive the type of innovation and incubator and startup mentality that comes with an exciting new launch of a headquarters related to Amazon, because it can have very, very real tangible benefits to the bottom line of the city, as well as to opportunities for children that are going to school here and other members of the community that are looking for new opportunities in that area of the industry. So it's exciting times, and I'm excited for Falls Church because it is a unique place. And when you look at something like this that can benefit indirectly, we are in a good spot. And so I'm excited to see what our community can draw from this, both directly and indirectly, over the next 10, 15, 50 years. So thanks.
Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm glad Mr. Whittinghouse circled back to Amazon because it reminded me of a question I wanted to ask that might have budget implications. I don't know. Today's story was, great, we got it. Tomorrow's story is, what did we have to give in order to get it? Listening to Katie Crystal and Christian Dorsey both being interviewed on the radio tonight, the line of questioning was, yeah, but what's the concessions package? There's nothing in our budget that is tied to giving anything into the Amazon deal, is there?
No.
Okay, you read some comments that people make about how packages are put together to attract businesses, and we've done a lot of attracting businesses here in the last 15 years, but it's my recollection that all those deals have been pluses for the city without any cost that would not have otherwise been entered into. And the Amazon deal would be the same, right? If we derive benefits, it's not because we had to give anything into it.
Yeah, so the city has put no local tax dollars into the regional effort to bring Amazon headquarters to Northern Virginia. The state has, and so that has some implications for us. The state's contributions, however, are largely in the form of investments that they're making to transportation as part of the innovation campus that Virginia Tech, which will be Virginia Tech's principal Northern Virginia campus, and other types of investments. Now, will that mean that other state funding sources that we might otherwise access will be impacted? That possibly could be the case, and we haven't done that analysis yet. But I think the state's role is to make investments in Northern Virginia, and I think we can be the beneficiary of those investments as well.
Okay, my second line of inquiry relates to some of the things Ross was talking about the potential for this to benefit the community. The Economic Development Committee hasn't really talked about this, but are we contemplating some sort of staff level or staff and electeds session where we would sort of blue sky that notion, or is the Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel that is coming together tomorrow, right, and Thursday? I mean, that comes at a good time. It's a lot of bright people brought into the city to look at the city. I mean, the east side, but still the city. And I would presume that they might have the Amazon announcement in their minds, and might be the beginning of an effort to talk about what good things could come our way.
That's an excellent point, and it's a good opportunity to give a plug for the Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel that will convene this week. They'll get kicked off tomorrow in the early afternoon, and then they'll report out Thursday afternoon at 4:30. Information on that can be found. We are putting out public information on that, and so that can be found on the city's webpage. The reporting out, I think, would be the area that would be the most interest to the public, and that'll be at George Mason Square at 4:30 on Thursday. But you are absolutely correct. Those are all professionals who make their living in land development in one form or the other. They'll all be convening to study the eastern gateway to the City of Falls Church, i.e. the Seven Corners area, and the Eden Center area, to consider its future. And so the news of this week will be on everybody's mind.
Okay, great, thanks.
Ms. Hardy.
Sorry, just a follow-on thought on the whole Amazon discussion. So I think everyone generally agrees that this is great news for the region, and a rising tide lifts all boats. So I think hopefully with the revival of the office market in Arlington, Alexandria, it also does good things for us too. I know we have commercial tax abatement programs and like a rehab program for people to come in and redo office buildings. I wonder whether we should revisit that, or at least relaunch it and push it as more eyes are on the region and on Falls Church. That might be a good opportunity to kind of plug where we might have office vacancies or where we might want buildings rehabbed, just knowing that people will be in demand and want to come to the region. Market our stuff too. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments from Ms. Bawa? Thank you for your fine work, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to...
I'm sorry. So we'll be talking about the budget again in earnest on December 3rd?
December 3rd is our kickoff for budget planning. We actually, at the staff level, are starting now, have already started on the capital improvements program. But in terms of revenue projections and an overall strategic discussion with the council, that's on December 3rd.
And that's a regular Monday meeting as opposed to meeting sometimes in the past we've met like on a Saturday or whatever.
It'll be a Monday night meeting, and it'll be a joint session with the school board.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, sir. And we next have a report from Jenny Carroll on the update on the library project.
All right, thank you, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So I just wanted to come to you with a brief update on the library project. We are at about 10 to 15% of design at this time, and the schematic design and the cost estimate are in the final stages, and we expect to present to staff and the library board in the next weeks, and we will then come to council and also bring the design to the public as well. And just a couple of things that have happened and that are going to happen in the next about month or so. Last week, on the 7th, we went to the Architectural Advisory Board with a request for recommendations and feedback on the exterior design of the building. It was generally a positive response. They were in favor of a more liberal interpretation of the colonial style requirement, so we will give that feedback to the library board as well. We are also going to go to the Planning Commission work session on the 19th. And then on December 3rd for the variances. With the Planning Commission's recommendation, we will then go to the Board of Zoning Appeals on December 13th. And then we expect to submit the site plan in the January-February timeframe. We are also working on a temporary location. The library will not be closed during construction. We will be open, just in a different location. We are working with the school and the library boards to use the TJ trailers during construction. So there's a large trailer that sits next to Thomas Jefferson Elementary School. It's about 7 trailers wide. About 6,000 square feet. So we are currently working on an MOU with the schools, and it is with the schools at this time. And we will also go out to the neighbors as well. And so the final item that I wanted to talk with you all about or update you on is our collection. With the staff and the library consultants and the library board, we've been having significant discussions regarding the collection. Our vision for the library is a balance between the collection and also the public and staff spaces in order to provide the best services possible to the public. We will be book-centric while maintaining and adding services and spaces that have been requested by citizens and patrons. Our building will be accessible to all patrons, and as such, it will be ADA compliant. The library board has agreed that the size of our collection will accommodate the ADA requirements and be maintained at a level that is consonant with our shelving space in the new building. Our collection will be right-sized for our community and for our space, our physical space. With our collection, we have an active selection process that is extremely responsive to citizen suggestions, patron suggestions. We also have a deselection process and criteria that's guided by staff in a professional manner. When an item is deselected, or the library responsibly and thoughtfully sends those items to the library book sale or as donations to others in need. There are deselected items and donated items that are not appropriate to pass on to others. So usually it's condition, moldy, mildew, damaged, and as a last resort, those items are recycled. So our goal is to provide a vital collection that is useful, accurate, and addresses the needs and the interests of the community. And I welcome any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions or comments?
So the public engagement opportunity for the design, you know, the general public, there was some considerable interest, would be at the planning commission meetings and...
We will actually hold separate public engagement activities. So we've been discussing those. Kim Callahan and I have been discussing those. And it will occur in the month of December, and we'll do a variety of things, from the farmers market to meetings at the library, to, we've also discussed coming to the community center when there's basketball apparently happening.
Right, exactly.
is the latest sport.
Yeah.
So we will get in as much public engagement as we can.
So December is a
But
month
the
that you're-
December timeframe, and I think we'll give ourselves some time to get plenty of feedback.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep, and people can also come to any public meeting, so library board tomorrow, December, planning commissions, BZA meetings.
Might not be a bad, I mean, I know this all seems second nature to you, but might not be a bad idea to put together in one place exactly all the places where you are going to show up, just not that people are going to go to the BZA meeting, fine, a meeting as it is, but just so people are aware that this proposal has worked its way through the process very diligently and thoroughly, even if they weren't watching it, others were.
Oh, all right, Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thank you for your report. On the collection, you mentioned that it's going to be book-centric.
Yes.
But I know that there are also a lot of online databases and videos and CDs and other things that you have. So that all is part of the collection, correct?
That will remain part of the collection.
And are you expanding any of those?
We are looking at streaming services and, of course, increasing our ebooks and e-audiobooks, always.
Right. Okay. And then for the community outreach, you did a video last time around.
I did
that
a
was
video.
Really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. I'm just suggesting that you might want to do that again, because
I've been talking with Susan Finarelli.
That's great, because that was very helpful, I think, for people to see what was going on.
Yep.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, especially for all the care and talking about how you're going to pare down the collection during the renovation. I think that's really helpful. You mentioned there's going to be variances that are going to go to the Planning Commission. Given that we were just talking about Park and Virginia and that intersection, can you preview what those variances that we're going to be requesting are?
I don't have all of them off of the top of my head. I do know that some of them are waivers and some of them are variances. So we're going to, the lot coverage will increase, so I believe that's a variance. And then I think it's a waiver on our parking spaces. And then the setbacks is another variance. So on Park in Virginia.
know it's mainly in the Planning Commission's domain, and we usually don't look at these things, but I think I'd just be curious what sort of exceptions we're making there, especially as we think of the broader Park Avenue streetscape and the plans.
I think when we came the last time that Kim talked about them a little bit, but we would definitely talk about them when we came with schematic design and the cost estimate package. More in depth, I should say.
All right. I've got a question or two for you. One, you mentioned the design, the style of architecture. To my recollection, there is a covenant, is there not, on the property? Is there
There is.
someone you're going to run the design by to get kind of a blessing before you go?
Kim and I are going to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd hate to build it in kind of a neo-colonial and find out that someone objects to it from, the covenant holder. So,
Right. The deed is actually fairly general, so it says colonial style, and our building right now is not precisely colonial style. So I think as we move forward, we will figure out who we should run the deed by.
I would definitely do that before you get
Yep.
hard on construction costs. At this point, do you anticipate that your project costs will come in at budget?
We have just completed, or we're in the process of completing the schematic design and the cost estimate, so we'll have that fairly soon. I haven't had any sort of red flags pop up to me as we've had the different meetings, so I think we'll be within the range.
Okay.
I don't think we'll be under budget.
Gotcha. For some reason, that never seems to happen. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, let's hear any other questions. We thank you for your presentation this evening and
Okay.
for your continuing good work at the library.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
All right.
Mayor, can I make just one coda to Ms. Bawa's presentation? One, just that, with the kind of buoyancy that came with today's announcement about Amazon HQ2, I would say that our revenue forecasts are not so buoyant. And it's partly reflected in our first quarter financial report, but it's just important that people not sort of start thinking, okay, well, we're going to have tons of money. When we're looking at our forecast for next year and we're looking at assessed value for property, we're looking at this being not a big revenue year. And in talking with colleagues around the region, I think that's sort of a generally shared view as well. So I just thought I'd add that note. But
If I may, can I add to that? So Arlington came out with their projections for next year, and their overall revenue growth is 1.5%. They started the process early, so they just presented last month.
Is the region agreeing on like a Amazon factor of like, we think property values might go up by X% across the board because of the increased demand?
well, our assessed values are effective as of January 1, so of this year, not next year. So probably not. But two, just remember also that the plan this is a 10-year rollout of the 25,000 jobs that are part of this commitment, and so that's an incremental approach.
I would just say that it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years at best before you start to see any real meaningful impact from the Amazon relocation. I mean, obviously more specific and acute in Arlington and Crystal City from leasing space, but it is exciting. But people need to understand that you're several years off before there being some type of meaningful, probably direct revenue impact to the city.
All right.
Okay.
any
And
other-
we're in the 10th year of recovery as far as the last recession. I always say that, so
Yeah.
just so we're
Let's
aware of
say
it.
3 to 5 years then.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Shields, is there any more to your report? Okay, why don't we move on to business on the agenda then? Will you call the first item, please?
TO 18-09 is an ordinance to amend the housing, taxation, and zoning, several sections of each of those, of the city code, to update language referring to persons with disabilities and align the definition of group home with state code.
Mayor, Ms. Vincent will give the staff report. Okay.
Thank you. The purpose of the code changes that we're proposing here is to remove very outdated language that was common when I was a child many, many, many decades ago. And to replace it with language that is more respectful to the residents of the city. I'm asking for you all to do a first reading and to refer this out to the Planning Commission and to the Human Services Advisory Committee, and to schedule a second reading.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any comment about this? Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Vice Mayor Conley?
I just want to say thank you for bringing this to us. It's much cleaner, and as I read through it, it makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I move to grant first reading to TO 1809, refer to the Planning Commission and Human Services Advisory Council for comments, schedule second reading and public hearing for December 10th, 2018, and advertise the same according to law.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Lichtenhouse. Will you call the vote, please?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Thank you, Council. The motion carries.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Next item?
TR 18-49 is a resolution to approve the use of standard project agreements with the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission for projects included in the city's adopted budget ordinance, and authorize the city manager to execute on behalf of the city an agreement for $845,754 in Metrobus operating funds for the Route 3T extension of service during peak hours from the West Falls Church Metro Rail Station to the East Falls Church Metro Rail Station.
All right, long awaited. Mr. Shields.
It is. Well, this is an agreement that will allow us to move forward in restoring bus service that will serve all of West Broad Street, so that they will have a direct transit alternative to the East Falls Church Metro Station, and conversely through Pemmon Hills back to Tyson's Corner. This is a service that was cut about 3 years ago, and using our going through the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, we're now deploying commuter choice funds to restore that bus service and make that transit connection again. So Mr. Stoddard, Jeff Sykes, Carrie Odino, our transportation team, Councilmember Snyder with his role in our transportation boards, Mr. Duncan, I think everybody had their shoulder to the wheel in trying to restore this bus service. We had a great deal of public comment, as the council will recall, when that service was cut. So we are very pleased to announce that with this agreement, we anticipate that this service will resume right after the new year. I believe the first day of service is the first week of January, January 2nd or thereabouts. We'll have more publicity about that when we get to it, but this agreement will allow that to happen.
All right, are there any questions, Mr. Snyder?
No.
Comments? All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you. It's good to see the 66 toll money go to a good purpose like this. Is this resuming the same frequency and schedule that the old one did? Or is it a different schedule? It only said rush hour in the staff reports. I didn't know if it was.
It is slightly modified. I don't recall exactly what the old service was, and I don't know if I have right in front of me what the expected headways will be for this bus service. We can get that information out, and that will certainly be part of our publicity for the line.
Great.
But it is intended to be a rush hour service. That is correct.
So we'll have the 28A, and then we'll have this new one, or the old one back. So we'll have two running on Broad.
Correct.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Z.
Assuming this will pass, and I see no reason why we would not support this, can you make it a point to ensure that the broadest possible public outreach is given, that we crow about this, we announce this, we have 3T t-shirts and whatever else it takes?
Yes.
Thank you.
I second that motion. Has it really been 3 years since the service? It just doesn't seem like it was that long ago. Wow. So the folks who came and spoke and wrote and, let's try to get back to them. Let them know.
Yes.
Winter Hill particularly, I remember there was a particular group of people from that community, so maybe through their homeowners association. The T-shirts could be distributed. Dan Z's T-shirts.
All right,
Mr. Merritt, do you need a motion?
Not yet.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Snyder, I think, has a comment to make.
Yeah, perhaps we could do some sort of formal ceremony when it starts and invite folks, and I think the idea of Mr. Z showing up in a T-shirt in January is a wonderful idea. But seriously, I think we should also sort of suggest that if there's some kind of novel, either technology or operations that Metro wants to try out on this, that we might offer this as a potential service for that as well. I'm interested in the whole technological developments in the transportation field, and so just my thought would be that we'd want to potentially make this route an example of some emerging technology if the opportunity presents itself. So, thank you.
I have to say along those lines, I've talked about this for a couple of years, but I'd love to see the electronic, I don't know what you call them, that basically tell you when the next bus is coming. So you don't just sit there and wait, and maybe it's there, maybe it's not, but they'll actually update you as to when the next bus is going to arrive.
Yeah, it's something that we did work to try to get. It was not easy. And it is true that WMATA has a service that you can access through your phone of the next bus service. And it through its years has had some ups and downs, but I believe it works quite well now. They've got the system debugged. And so I think that's how most people are using it. You'll also see in our newer buildings at West Broad, for instance, in the elevator lobby, they have next bus TV screens that provide that information. That's useful for you if you're waiting in the lobby. But just getting the partnership with WMATA and getting everything there, that proved to be a difficult process.
All right. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TR 18-49.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Connolly?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Thank you, Council. The motion carried.
All right. So it looks like we're on to the consent agenda, which I don't see any items listed under the consent agenda. Is that right? Okay. So now it looks like we have some other business about the demographic trend report, Mr. Shields.
That's correct, and I'll invite Mr. Stoddard to introduce this item, but we're going to provide council with an overview of a recent demographics report that was done for the City of Falls Church. It is very interesting, and this presentation has been made to the Planning Commission already, but we also want to get the council's comments on it or requests for additional clarifications or other points of information before we bring this report to a close. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Stoddard, who will also introduce our presenters for tonight.
Thank you, Wyatt. Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. I also want to call out another staff member in the crowd tonight, Jeff Hollern, sitting in the back row there. One of our new planners on staff came to us from Jamestown, New York, in upstate New York, actually very close to where I was born in Rochester. Jeff's been a great addition to the team already. He's the liaison to the Architectural Advisory Board. He's also working on a range of projects, including this demographics chapter update. The item before you tonight, the request is for council to review the demographic trends report. The trends report talks about 3 areas of demographics: population, households, and employment. In addition to reviewing the trends report, the request from staff is for the council to provide feedback on the proposed scope of work for the chapter update within the comprehensive plan. There is no recommended action. This is for discussion only. By way of background, demographics is a critical piece of information for city and urban planning. It provides information about population trends, and that, of course, relates to population needs when it comes to public and private services. The demographics chapter for the city's comprehensive plan was last updated 13 years ago. in 2005. The city and the region have seen quite a bit of change since that time, and so now is a good time to do an update. It's also an opportunity to ask those questions about the future and what kinds of impacts might Amazon HQ2 have on the city and the region. Let's see, jumping to the scope of the existing comprehensive plan. It's fairly broad in nature. It talks about population growth, racial and ethnic diversity, age and age composition of the population. It also talks about various aspects of that. It talks about things like educational attainment, income, households, and employment. And the proposed chapter update would cover all the same topics. To that, it would also add a couple discussion items. It would talk about not only what's going on in terms of the population, it would provide updated projections, and it would also talk about how those updated projections relate to other aspects of planning in the city, including specifically how it relates to housing needs in the city, how it relates to the needs for public facilities, and how it could play a role in the city's economic development efforts. As far as comprehensive plan chapter updates go, this process would be fairly quick. Most comprehensive plan chapters include a substantial number of functional items and prioritization of different efforts, whereas this effort is intended to be more factual in nature, as providing information and a base for other chapter updates. So the strategy for timing is listed in the timing section of the staff report. As Mr. Shields said, a kickoff with the Planning Commission was held on November 5th, earlier this month, kicking off here tonight with the City Council, moving into projections in February of next calendar year, 2019, and then closing with actions and adoption by Planning Commission and Council in April and May. To comment on that Planning Commission kickoff, the Planning Commission reviewed it, as I said, on November 5th. They were generally positive about the information included in the trends report. Questions they had and they wanted to see answered as the projection work goes forward related mostly to the types of housing that are available and how that relates to some of the demographic trends that the city is seeing. So that connection between housing and demographics. A finer grained look at population over age 55. If you look through some of the old census files, you'll see that a lot of the age brackets stop at age 55. And so the question is, how do we get more information now that folks are living substantially longer than that? And then lastly, that connection about demographic trends, office size, and employment type. So how does firm size and firm location relate to things like office sizes and office vacancy rates? All fair discussion for a topic about demographics, as well as launch points for other efforts and studies. With that, I actually want to turn it over, certainly not going to steal the thunder of the presenters tonight. Lisa Sturdivant and Ryan Price are here with us tonight. Both of them are experts in demographics with expertise in population, housing, employment, and their expertise extends not only within this functional area, but also within this region, as well as immediate localities. And with that, I will turn it over to them.
Welcome. Welcome to Falls Church.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Lisa Sturdivant, and I'm president and founder of Lisa Sturdivant & Associates. I'm here with my colleague, Ryan Price, and we focus on demographic, economic development, and housing market research. Doing a lot of work here in the Washington area. We actually worked together at the George Mason Center for Regional Analysis for a number of years, doing deep dives into the demographics and economics here in the Washington area. And so we are very pleased to be able to work here with Paul and his staff in the City of Falls Church. Ryan worked previously as a planner with the City of Alexandria. I was demographer for Arlington County for a number of years, and so we're in this local government sort of demographics and projection stuff really deep, and we're really happy to have the chance to talk today. Should we proceed through the slides with? Would you mind forwarding for me? I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So we'll go to the next slide. So I was just talking about ourselves. And if we go to the next slide here, as Paul mentioned, we looked at a number of demographic characteristics related to population, households, and workforce. And we used mostly publicly available data from the Census Bureau, along with a few other sources. In the report that you've been provided with, there's a lot of detailed data in the appendix. The presentation we have for you today is where we looked at the data that were available and we pulled out what we saw were the most important trends moving forward. So we're not talking about everything, we're actually sort of pulling out the things that we thought were the most important to this conversation. And so on the next slide, One of the things we wanted to start is to remind ourselves why populations grow. And populations grow in a community for two reasons. Births outpace deaths, right? So that's natural migration. And net migration, more people move in than move out. And so if we think about the characteristics we're going to talk about, it's also helpful to keep this in mind that demographic characteristics change either because of births exceeding deaths of existing population, or in-migration exceeds out-migration, and populations change in those ways. So we can come back to that. But if we go to the next slide, the most recent data for the City of Falls Church has actually broken that population change out. And so you can see, just again, by way of showing where we're starting with looking at population change, if you think about the population growing by 715 people over this 1 year period, you can see where that increase comes from. A lot of it from natural increase, which we'll talk about, and then also from migration, both internationally, but primarily domestically, people moving here to the City of Falls Church from other places in the U.S. Because it was asked before, domestic migration could include someone who is an international immigrant who moved to Dallas first and then moved here. That's a domestic migrant because they were in Dallas prior to being here. So if we go to the next slide, I'm actually going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to walk us through some of the findings from the report, and then I'll pick it up at the end to sort of talk about where we're going to after this. So thanks again for the chance, and I'll turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Lisa. Good evening, council members. Thanks for having us. My name is Ryan Price, Senior Associate with the firm. And I'm going to walk through some of the key findings that we found from the population trends as well as the household level trends. And in terms of the population trends, we took a close look at three key age segments of the population as well as the racial composition. So if you could advance the slide. So the millennial population is growing in the City of Falls Church, a bit faster than the region overall, but a little bit slower than some of the adjacent neighbors. So there are about 1,700 residents aged 25 to 34, which is about 10% increase over the study period. And the study period that we looked at was between 2011 and 2016. So as you can see from the map, this growth trajectory, it's similar to other inside the Beltway communities, such as Arlington, as well as West Falls Church. But it's a little slower than places like Idawood, as well as Pemmit Hills, which may be attributed to lower price points in the housing market in those areas. This could be driven by a number of factors. When you look at the multifamily housing stock in the city, compared to places like a Vienna or Herndon, which actually had a decline in millennials, you have more apartments in the city, which are things that millennials would be more likely to reside in, as well as location attributes, closer to transit, the Metro Rail system, as well as major job centers, Tyson's in DC, and urban walkable community are all things that millennials tend to look for as they look for a place to live in the DC region. Next slide. Back one. So the school age population is also growing. There's about 17.5% more residents aged 5 to 17 than there were at the beginning of the study period. We're seeing similar growth occur in places like Alexandria and Herndon. Interestingly, some of the fastest growth in this age segment is occurring just outside the city limits in places like Seven Corners and Idlewood. And what's driving this trend really in the city is families are having more children than they did in the past. And one indicator of that is the average household size, which during the study period went from about 2.46 to 2.56 in that 5-year window. And as we dug into the data a little bit further, we're also noticing some changes in household composition. And so a lot of this growth in the school-age population is being driven by families with 3 or more children. So there's about a 20% increase in that household composition. And at the same time, there's actually about a 10% decline in families with 1 to 2 children. And so as we'll see in a couple slides, it's actually the quantity of households with children actually decreased. But as you can see in these numbers here, the number of school-age children is increasing because the households with 3 or more kids. Next slide. So the growth in the 55 and older population has been strong in the city. About 1 out of every 4 Falls Church residents falls into this category, which is a similar share to the region. And a lot of this is being driven by the fact that the youngest baby boomers, those born in the early 1960s, are now entering this age segment. And so we're going to see this trend continue likely over the next few years, both locally as well as nationally. In terms of growth, it's about a 23.5% increase in this age segment in the city, which is similar to the region, but a little bit faster than other inner suburbs, such as Alexandria as well as Arlington. Next slide. Sure.
Is that graph mislabeled? It says change in school age population.
It is.
Okay.
Apologize.
So that's change in older
It's changed
adult.
in older adult
Got it,
population,
okay,
yep.
Thanks.
Good catch. So as you can see here, Falls Church is becoming more racially diverse, but at a slower pace than the Northern Virginia region as a whole. And along with Vienna and McLean, Falls Church is actually one of the least racially diverse communities in the Northern Virginia region. About 3 out of every 4 residents is non-Hispanic white. And as we look at the population growth over the study period, it breaks down into about a 60-40 split. So of the new residents that move to the city, about 60% are white, 40% are non-white. Now, when we look at the same data over the same time period at the region level, it's about an 80-20 split, with 80% being non-white and 20% being white. So we're seeing a different trend occur here in the city than as the Northern Virginia region as a whole.
Sorry, could you repeat that? Because that was a pretty big difference. I think I heard you say that new residents of the city are 40% minority versus in the region, 80% of new residents are in the minority?
That's correct. No, it was 40%. Yeah.
Newcomers, 60% white, 40% non-white. The existing population, though, is more like 80% white, 20% non-white. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 72% white.
Okay, so newcomers are somewhat more likely to be non-white than...
It is diversifying, but at a slower pace.
Okay.
Yeah. Next slide. So we also took a look at household level trends, really to gain insights into things like household composition, how that's changing, income levels, as well as the type of housing units that Falls Church households are occupying. Next slide. So there are more households in the city than 5 years ago, but this growth is being driven by households without children. So there's about a 10% increase overall in households, but about a 5.3% decline in households with children, which you can see was the sharpest decline in Northern Virginia. Areas directly next to the city, places like Seven Corners, Idawood, and Arlington, all had relatively high growth rate with this household composition type. And as we covered a few slides ago, this trend is largely being driven by an increase in families with 3 or more kids, but also a decline in the number of households with 1 to 2 kids.
Can I ask a clarifying question here?
Sure.
So in light of that data, you talked about where we actually had households with the 3 being the new 2.
Yeah.
Phenomenon. Is this a denominator issue? So is the raw number of households with children going down, or is it a percentage that's going down? Because are we just adding enough households in the denominator that the percentage is going down, or actually seeing an actual decrease in the raw number of households with children too?
So it's a decrease in the raw number.
You happen to have those numbers?
Yeah. I think.
Because it seems like it's, then you have 2 things going. You have the absolute raw number of households with children going down, and then in those households at this now smaller number, each one of those is contributing more children.
Right.
So it's both those factors that are driving that. Is that my
That is,
understanding?
yes. And so I do have a
denominator issue. Is an absolute
No, it is.
decrease.
It is a decrease, and I have the numbers actually right here. It was 1,688 in 2011 households with 1+ kids, and then in 2016 it was 1,598.
It's really interesting. Thank you.
Next slide. So as we look at kind of the other end of
Can
this,
I just ask a
sure.
quick question before you continue? Just from a surveying perspective, just curious, like the methodology that you guys go to gather this information. Because that's
Yeah.
a surprising number, frankly, if it's the raw
Yeah.
number that's going down, because there've been a lot of discussion over commercial development here in the city, number of new homes replacing older homes, the 3 being the new 2, which apparently is a status symbol now. I'm not sure. Maybe next year it'll be 4.
Yeah.
What's the methodology that you guys go through to collect this information? I mean, is it all census driven?
It is all census driven. We pulled publicly available data, the AC American Community Survey data. And in addition to that, though, when we're looking at it, a lot of the housing units that are coming online, and we'll get to this in a couple slides, are smaller units. And so while there is additional development occurring, they're not really units that are akin to that a family would occupy. So I think that we're seeing, it is census-based data, but then as we look at the kind of the tear down phenomena that you mentioned, we did look at the building permit data that was provided by staff, and I think it was over a 10-year period. It was like a net of maybe 40 to 50 additional homes. So it's really being driven by the fact that there are a lot more multifamily units than before. Next slide. So about a third of all the households in the city are people living by themselves. And, this is a little bit higher than other jurisdictions in the region, as you can see on the table on the right. Interestingly, Falls Church actually had the fastest growth in this household composition type. And this, like we kind of alluded to, is driven by the fact that there's been an increase in a diversification of the housing stock. And so there's a lot more smaller units that are more likely to be occupied by people living by themselves as opposed to families.
Do you have the age breakdown of the 30% of the households there? I'd be interested if it's distributed similar to what our population distribution looks like, or if it's skewed in a certain area or not.
Yeah, I don't have it available right here, but we certainly have it in the appendix, so we can get that number to you.
Great, thank you.
And it's also could be driven too by the fact, delayed family formation by the millennial population could also be driving some of this trend. So we alluded to this a little bit, but the housing stock is diversifying, and while single-family detached remains a significant component of the housing stock of the city, the data is actually suggesting now that there are more multifamily units than single-family units in the city. There's about a 15% increase. Yes.
So in 2016, that was when we opened 2 big multifamily buildings. Are they captured in this?
Yeah.
Because they weren't all full, I don't think. That doesn't matter. I'm trying to think, when did Lincoln at Tinner Hill open in 301 West Broad? That was 2016?
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if that's captured in this number or not.
So the census data on unit type are collected on units regardless of whether they're occupied. So if they're on the ground, they're included in the survey.
Okay.
So it is likely, now the census is a rolling census, so I can't say for sure.
Right.
But it is likely that they're included in this
Right.
number.
Okay.
Sorry to jump
Oh,
in.
good.
So would it be helpful to, because the schools have this great document that actually counts all the housing units in the city. Would that be helpful?
Certainly.
Going
yeah,
forward?
that would be.
Let's make,
Yeah,
can we
we
make
can
sure they get a
coordinate.
copy of that?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I
So
ask one other question?
Certainly.
Bring up your
Yeah.
all night on this one.
Please.
Is there anything in these numbers that tells you that kids are aging out of the school system, moving away, parents are staying here and choosing to stay in Falls Church, which becomes no kids in the house, but aging in place, I guess as they call it. Is there anything in the data that would suggest that?
In terms of the length of residing in the city, I don't think that we came across anything.
I don't know if we have it on hand, but.
We'll have to take a closer look at that question, but I think it was in terms of the, going through the school system and then leaving, nothing really jumped out, but I think that it was the growth in the school age population was really more from the larger families.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is there's been some conversation about folks move here for the schools, kids go to school and then they move away, meaning the entire family. And I'm curious to know if, Falls Church is a community, folks are moving here, raising their kids, going through the school system, kids move away, and parents decide, this is the community where I want to retire. So I'm aging in place. And so ferreting some of that out in the data, I'm curious to know, because if you have households living alone, is that just mean one person, or does that mean
Yeah, that would just be one
just
person.
one individual?
Yes.
Still, I'd be interested to know if there's if any of that data would lead you guys to that being part of the conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, we could certainly dig into that a little more. Like I said, nothing jumped out from the initial analysis, but we can look a little closer at it and see if something jumps out, and we can pass it along to Paul.
Yep.
Yeah, on that note, I concur. I think that'd be pretty interesting just to know what the churn of the community is. Because
Yeah.
in general, the whole region's pretty transient, or some
Yeah.
parts are pretty transient. So I think being able to benchmark ourselves against what the neighbors would see would help figure out, are we seeing more churn than others? Do people just stay here for schools, or do they actually stay here for the long run?
Right.
Because we're here for the schools, and I plan on being carried feet first out of my house.
By your kids or before they?
I don't know. Hopefully a long time from now, but that's the plan, to age in place here. So.
West Broad, Harris Teeter opened on July 22nd, 2016. And Lincoln was, maybe I'll find that here, but that was, shortly afterwards, somewhat afterwards.
So kind of as a comparison on this this increase in multifamily housing, when we look at other communities that tend to have more multifamily than, say Herndon or Vienna, places like Arlington, Alexandria, they both had a 9% increase in multifamily housing over the study period. Falls Church had a 15% increase. Next slide. So the city continues to have some of the highest incomes in the region. About 1 out of every 4 Falls Church households have an income of $150,000 or more, which is the 3rd highest in the Northern Virginia region of the community studied. What's interesting, though, is what's happening with the middle income segment. Those households making between $50,000 and $100,000. As you can see here, the city has really seen a surge in this income range, which is unique to the region. And a lot of this is being driven by that rise in one-person households. As this income range is really in line with the typical kind of business and professional services sector job in the DC market. And as Lisa will show us here through the employment trends, about 1 out of every 4 Falls Church resident that is employed in that sector. So a lot of that is probably driving this surge in kind of the middle income household range. With that, Lisa?
Thanks, Ryan. So, and to conclude this look at demographics, we really wanted to look at workforce. We wanted to look both at the characteristics of jobs physically located here in the city of Falls Church, as well as the residents who live here who work, whether they work here in the city or elsewhere. So those are the 2 different groups of folks we looked at. So if we look at the next slide at the types of jobs, the top slide are the sectors of jobs of Falls Church residents, so folks who live here, while the bottom are the top sectors of jobs located here. And so as Ryan mentioned, the greatest share of resident workers work in either professional and business services or in government. And as we know regionally, these are these are the 2 largest sectors in the Washington area economy. They're also the sectors that pay the highest wages in the Washington area economy. That top one will be a lot of where those Amazon employees will fall in those technical and professional services sector. When you look at the jobs physically located within the city, the biggest share are in healthcare and educational services. The data lump those together. It's primarily healthcare. Education in this category is not teachers. It's teachers are in public administration. So it's primarily healthcare. And then professional and business services, retail, and arts and entertainment. Particularly on the retail and the arts and entertainment, the city is highly concentrated in those sectors when compared to some other communities. But we will note we were only able to make the comparison to other jurisdictions, like let's say Arlington or Alexandria, rather than neighborhoods. And it's a little bit of a false comparison to look at the concentration of a place that's the size of the city of Falls Church with those larger places. If we look at the next slide.
Can I ask a question real quick?
course.
Where do you put tech jobs? in
Yep,
this?
so if you go back, the professional and business services is really, the long name is professional, technical, and business services, just not, and so they fall in that job. And they include not only technology jobs, they actually include not almost, but a lot of the government contractor jobs that are DoD related or are related to some of the technical agencies. So yeah, but the technical services jobs would be there. Yeah, of course.
Do you have the raw number of the jobs in Falls Church?
We have the raw number of the jobs in Falls Church. I'm going to get it wrong, so I'm going to look it up to see for sure. So we have a total of approximately 12,000 jobs in 2017, according to the Virginia Employment Commission. There is a little bit of quirkiness in the VEC data. They do sometimes do a poor job of putting businesses in the right jurisdiction, particularly in a community like Falls Church, where Falls Church, the name is associated with multiple addresses. We feel pretty good about that number based on the other data we looked at. And the biggest sector is in this healthcare sector at 1,200 jobs, just to put that in perspective. Again, those are jobs located here. So, okay. On the next slide, just to sort of break that resident employment versus at-place employment, you can see that the resident workers have a median annual earnings that's significantly higher than the median earnings associated with jobs here in the city. As we talk more about what some of these data mean for economic development as well as for housing needs, you can sort of see how these trends are influential. On the housing front, for example, if there was a sense that the folks who were working here in the community were having a harder time getting here and were ending up choosing to work elsewhere, that could be a housing issue, could be a transportation issue and a workforce development issue. But those are some of the things that we see when we see this kind of difference in the two different populations. If we go to the next slide, we know that about 30% of Falls Church residents who work commute out to Fairfax County. That's not surprising. Next largest share go into DC. Similarly, about 40% of the jobs here in the community are held by people who live in Fairfax. Again, not surprising. There's 1 million people in Fairfax and it's next door. But about more than 1 out of 10 jobs here in the city of Falls Church are held by somebody who comes from the more distant places in Virginia or from the District of Columbia, which suggests that there are a fair number of people who commute fairly long distances to come to work here in the city of Falls Church. And then on the,
when you say,
please.
Places
sorry.
outside of Virginia, you don't mean outside.
Should be outside of Northern Virginia.
Right,
That's probably the
outside
better.
of Fairfax particularly, or Northern Virginia generally?
Outside of Northern Virginia generally. Yep, so this could be places like Fauquier or Warren, or out of the Northern Virginia jurisdictions beyond Loudoun, beyond Prince William, sort of beyond those jurisdictions is what we would count as outside.
Okay.
You guys have caught 2 mistakes in our slides that the Planning Commission didn't catch, so thank you for bringing attention to this. Okay, on the next slide, I want to just end before turning over to any other questions and comments you have. Paul alluded to what the next steps are here, and we're eager to begin work with the city staff to develop demographic projections. And the city has long done projections of population, households, housing units, and employment for many reasons, including part of the COG cooperative forecasting process. And we're going to build off of those projections that have been done in the past, but we're going to take a bit of a scenario-based approach to forecasting to ask some what-ifs about an Amazon effect, or to ask some what-ifs about decisions being made about planning or investment or infrastructure, or to ask some what-ifs about, well, what happens to things like the impact on public facilities, the impact on the housing market, and so on, as a result of the demographics. And we're really looking forward to having that demographics exercise be less of a technical exercise, although we will hopefully bring what you feel is technical expertise to it, but rather have it be more of a conversation with the community on what it means, instead of just throwing out a set of projections. We will then continue that conversation to more explicitly talk about what the current trends and future projections mean for housing needs, for public facilities, for schools, and for economic development here in the city. And as Paul mentioned, the idea is for this this information to help serve the other planning processes for the city. Our job, we think, is to look for the things that we see in the data that might be most helpful in making those kinds of decisions, rather than the demographics themselves being a decision making. They are what they are, right? And so the idea is, can we help provide the information that is the most helpful information for decision making? And all of that leads into the final demographics chapter of the comp plan that Paul mentioned at the outset. And I think we have one final slide just to say thank you. And if there's any questions or comments, I'll invite Ryan up, and we're happy to have those questions.
Yeah, I would just make one comment from a scenario perspective. As much as we talk about how exciting it is to have Amazon, I mean, if you read some of the news articles and some of the surrounding jurisdictions in Seattle related to an Amazon impact,
Sure.
I don't want to focus just on Amazon because Apple's out there looking,
Sure.
And other large tech companies as well. And if this does become kind of a corridor to attract that type of talent, affordability issues and housing needs, some of the issues that we talk about here, which are certainly issues, can be exacerbated by that in a very major way. And so I think it would behoove all of us from a demographics analysis to really dig into, what does the potential impact of professional services growth in Northern Virginia mean for affordability in our housing mix here in the city. I think that'll be incredibly important.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think one of the things we're really eager to do is to bring a regional perspective to some of the analyses for the City of Falls Church, for the very reasons you mentioned, that we operate in this regional housing market, this regional labor market. And so, yes, to your point, that is something we really hope to focus on.
Concurrently, we've just received and have looked at very closely the housing portion of the comprehensive plan. I'm sure that was made available to you, but it's been represented to us that the greatest need in affordable housing here would be multi-bedroom units, and so we take that as fact, tied to the AMI. But I think we would be very interested in knowing, in your distribution of school-age children, how that's tied to what the need is for particular housing, and of course what the income bracket is as well. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to pull that out for us as you go along.
Yeah, just to make one comment on that, one thing I wanted to emphasize is that as we looked at this growth in 3+ children, if we didn't say explicitly, it was entirely within the homeownership population that we saw the increase in the 3+ children population. So when we were looking at the growth in the renter population, the need for multifamily housing, we didn't look at the current gap as measured by affordability, but we didn't see the growth of those kinds of units, certainly in the data we looked at.
Well, we're having a big conversation. I wouldn't call it a debate yet. I'm sure it'll turn into a debate. We have some members of council that have taken an adamant position on this particular topic with regard to the need for affordable housing, and so we seem to be stuck right now on current metric and throughout the region around 6%. So that's not broken down by type, and so it would certainly inform this conversation and the upcoming debate on what our needs are and what we should do about it.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Artie.
Great, really fascinating. Thank you for your work on this. I love all the charts that you had that benchmarked Falls Church against our neighbors. One request for the next iteration of this, I wonder if we can just look at our population segments over time and just be able to show that, because I think that's important to kind of see how things change. I think you have it all in there already, but just a different view to kind of show how Falls Church has evolved.
That's a great idea. Even under the longer term, not just since 2011.
Yes, and
yes.
then the projections.
Yes, I
So
gotcha. Yep.
On the projections point, I think each year the schools also get an enrollment projection and working with Weldon Cooper. How does all this going to match up with that we look at?
Oh, that's a great question. And so on the projection side, the Weldon Cooper School enrollment projections will be one of the inputs for sure. And actually sort of also one of the benchmarks, like, is what we're doing consistent, right? If we say a growth of 100% of seniors, but we're also seeing all the school-age population, well, that can't be right. So we'll use them both as an input and as a, and as you all know, the Weldon Cooper projections are also based on a methodology that has its strengths and weaknesses. And so we would want to make sure that, for you all, we brought our evaluation of the reliability of their estimates as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, I think definitely we should inform each other. on this.
Absolutely.
On that note, I think the school board's actually meeting tonight and looking at this year's Weldon Cooper projections.
Absolutely, great.
So I could not find them online, so maybe a request for the city manager if we could get that to the council. Because I think not only are they publishing their official, I guess, 2018, 2019 school year numbers, but also the projections on their agenda tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, and thank you for this great information. You can tell from our intense curiosity, we're all wannabe demographers, I think.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah, I wasn't good enough at math to pass that in school, but I applaud your suggestion that we'd like to make this in the coming months with the boards and commissions and the community more than just a demographic exercise, but a conversation about what these numbers tell us about what we were and are and hope to be.
Yeah.
That'll be a challenge, I think, for not only you all, but the staff to, when you bring it to a board or commission, there's probably one or two things in there that particularly, relate to that board or commission, whether it's transportation or housing or the historical commission or whatever. So it's a communications challenge to try to get the community. I would encourage you to think about maybe going out to some community groups too, like VPAS and CBC and others that just kind of have a general interest in the community in a way that's more intense like ours. Because, this kind of big data reflects and informs the policy decisions that we make. I mean, I know folks think that we're just doing this by the seat of the pants, but, these numbers are here for a reason. I mean, the numbers that you're showing about the change in number of households and composition of households reflect choices that we have made here in the last 15 years to change the city of Falls Church from what it was to a new kind of place, retaining all the fine qualities of the past, but hopefully making ourselves relevant for the future. So, you all bringing numbers to that discussion helps us explain to the community, why we're doing what we're doing. We have a very expensive and high-quality school system that we need to support, and one way to support that is to bring in more folks who are younger and don't have kids in the school system. We've, according to your numbers, are on our way to achieving some version of that. Maybe not as thoroughly as Arlington does, but at any rate, my final thought is, given your, breadth of experience in the region, once we're through it all, I think it'd be helpful for you to come back and help us, look ahead and say, if we want to move certain things, like Mr. Z suggested, well, we might be interested in workforce housing or some kind of affordable housing, but, this kind rather than this kind. Okay, well, what would we do in terms of policies to get this kind that we could all agree on? I think you have a unique perspective on what other jurisdictions have done to make that happen. So look forward to visiting with you further and to you engaging with the community.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we look forward to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for a very thorough report. We look forward to hearing more from you.
You bet. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
Can I ask Mr. Stoddard a question?
Yeah, of course.
Mr. Stoddard, can I ask you a question just about the chapter, the old chapter?
Yes, ma'am.
This attachment 1 is the 2005 chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I was really surprised to read it. That's how some of the projections in there were so far off. That the prediction was 2025, we would have 14,900 people. And and as I went through, I just started some things where I thought, oh yeah, we've done that already.
Correct. There are some places where it is very close to accurate, and then there are some places where it is very far from accurate. I think this is one of those things that happens with demographics, that you're projecting into the future, and you don't quite know what policy levers are going to get pulled and what the regional economy is going to do. And so you're trying to make guesses, educated guesses about the future, and the further out you look, at this point these are now 13 years old, and so they just didn't project certain things. Arlington County got caught by surprise with the moving out of empty nesters and the moving in of younger families with more kids. So they actually had to convert some school facilities that had converted to community centers back to school facilities, so they had to make that change. no one in the DC region projected what would happen when you move from a single income household to a dual income household, and suddenly household prices just skyrocketed in the region. So these things that are happening out in the population or the economy, they can have really dramatic impacts in unexpected ways.
So my question is, since this was done in 2005, has there been any interim work done on demography at all, or we just went from 2005 to 2017?
So staff updates numbers on a regular fashion to participate in the COG cooperative forecast effort. That's both a top-down effort where there are control numbers about population and employment, but then a bottom-up approach about where those specific numbers of population and employment might land within a particular jurisdiction or within the region. So the city at the staff level has been participating in that, but nothing at the public level or the official policy level.
Okay. So maybe as we go forward with this, that would be a good thing to do, since we are in such a dynamic time, to say that we'd like to see this done every 5 years or 2 years.
I'll just make a plug for my profession, urban planning, that the Code of Virginia does direct municipalities to review and update as needed their comprehensive plans on a 5-year basis. I think as the council is aware, the city has been moving through this on a chapter by chapter effort, and this is certainly one to keep refreshed regularly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, really. I mean, we never finish. We should get to the end and start over at the beginning, probably.
Correct. It's a conversation, and conversations never really end.
Is there an answer to the question which I was asked today? What is our population expected to be by you all or Weldon Cooper or whoever by 2030? I think that's the furthest out that we dare guess. Have you seen a number?
We'll bring those numbers to you. I think we've got some older numbers, as I had mentioned earlier, through the cooperative forecasts. But we'll be bringing, as part of this effort, one of the deliverables is not only the updated chapter, but also population and employment projections on 5-year increments. So I think 2020 through 2040 or 2045.
And finally, of course, during the course of your work here, we will be making a momentous decision about the scale of development at West Falls Church, which will move these numbers significantly, you know, like almost to the point of everything we've done up to now, we're going to do again in a much more limited time window, I think. So try to factor that in too as we plan ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Oh, you got another question?
Just one last request. So while I asked for data from the school board on the Weldon Cooper, let's share this with them, because I think they probably find this pretty interesting as they think about school forecasts and things too.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Let's move on to business not on the agenda. Is there any business not on the agenda anyone would like to discuss? Any standing regional committees or council liaison reports? Mr. Z?
Just a quickie here that tomorrow's meeting at COG for the Climate, Energy, and Environmental Policy Committee, we will have 3 former chairs there, Jay Fassett, Roger Berliner, and Penny Gross, to start a sort of a mini strategic visioning of next year's program, which is something I don't think they've ever done, but I'm encouraged by that effort. Thank you.
Good, excited.
Could we begin to socialize the notion that the Economic Development Committee might, in celebration of a momentous year of accomplishment, combine its November and December meetings into one meeting? I know staff will be pleased to hear that. And try to hold that meeting on Friday, December 7th. Let's just float that notion around and see how staff reacts to that. That works for Ms. Hardy and me, but obviously we hope it would work for everyone else too. In the morning at whatever hour is convenient for you, but we could do it as early as 9. Thank you.
All right, any other reports, any council member comments? Ms. Hardy?
Had a small request. In anticipation of the holiday event lighting on the 26th, an idea that's come up when we talk about parking is, I know we have those portable lit signs. I think that they currently tell people where leaf vacuuming is happening. Could we deploy one of those to tell people where public parking will be for that night if they choose to park downtown? An idea that came from a citizen that I thought was a good way to use an existing resource we have and get people downtown. And
all right, anything else? Mr. C?
Also, the issue of identification that is provided to you by your driver's license. By 2020, I know that seems far away, but if you think about the next time we vote, you'll need to have a brand new license. And just to begin the process of knowing what documents you have to bring to show the DMV, it turns out you need a lot. And for those whose spouses have very limited bills or other kinds of proof that they would accept, it becomes something to think about whether you can come up with those kind of documents. But Councilmember Duncan reminded me that the DMV will be here on December 7th, and here's your chance to actually get started on that process. I just mentioned this because my wife is Swedish and she wants to get this done before the end of this fiscal year, this calendar year. So we're all reminded.
All right, thank you for the update. Any other council member comments? If not, why don't we go to approval of the minutes? Eli, Duncan, what are your comments?
Mr. Mayor, on the minutes of July 10th, let me put my drugstore glasses on. The minutes of July 10th, 2017, on line 153, the spelling of Gina Kacek, I can spell it, but I can't pronounce Gina Kacechi, I think is C-A-C-E-C-I, just one C in the middle, I believe. Line 258, it's Moffett Roller, M-O-F-F-E-T-T, line 258. And line 397 is... Oh, it says the meeting adjourned at 12:19 p.m. I don't think we went quite that long. I don't think we went into the next day and after lunch, so I believe that's 12:19 a.m.
Are you sure?
I remember, yeah, I know, it definitely felt like it. With those corrections, Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval of the minutes of Monday, July 10th, 2017.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Anyone else have any other comments? I'm presuming they didn't. All right, all in favor?
All right.
Opposed, abstentions, the ayes have it.
For the-
Mr. Duncan, how about?
And for the minutes of Monday, August 14th, 27, line 84. Peter Smirniotopoulos is P-O-L-O-U-S, I believe. Line 93, intended to split the broadcast schedule. Line 103, it's Capital Bike Share, Capital Bike Share, not the building, but the city. And 107 and 110, I think Railroad Cottages is a proper noun, and so it should be capitalized. And with those changes, Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval of the minutes of August 14th, 2017.
Can anyone best Mr. Duncan on any other comments?
Second.
All right, do we have a, you've made a motion, Mr. Duncan, Vice Mayor Conley made a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have
Opposed?
to abstain.
Oh, right, yes.
Okay, so, all right, so why don't we just do this one more time? All in favor?
Aye.
And then all who abstain?
Abstain.
We have 2 abstentions and any nay? None, so 5 in favor, 2 abstentions. All right, so let's see what else we have tonight. So is there anything else anybody wants to talk about before we go into closed session? Okay, if not, I'm going to go ahead and read a motion if I can find it for our closed session. Looks like this is it. All right, so, and why don't we take just a short break when we go into closed session to give them time to get the mics down and the cameras and like. Upon a motion made by Council Member
Connolly.
and seconded by Council Member
Z.
and passed by a vote of City Council, council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.3-3711A28 for discussion or consideration of information subject to the exclusion in subdivision 11 of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3705.6, where making such information public prior to entering into an interim or comprehensive agreement will adversely affect the financial interest or bargaining position of the public entity. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder? Yeah. Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. Okay, it is 9:40 something, 9:39. All right, let's take a short break and we'll go in closed session. Thank you. Lichtenhouse? Snyder? Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. All right, here's our certification. Upon a motion made by council member,
Connolly.
seconded by council member,
Hardy.
and pass upon affirmative roll call vote in open session, it was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by city council. Councilmember Conley?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yeah.
Z?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. All right, is there anything else that needs to be said tonight?
Mayor moves adjourn.
Let's do it. We are adjourned.